Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to this TM Forum and Comviva webinar, Scaling AI for Success in Customer Value Management. My name is Mark Newman. I'm Chief Analyst at TM Forum. And joining me today is Amit Sanyal. Amit is Senior VP and COO within the Consumer Value Solutions business of Comviva. Amit, maybe you could just give us a quick 30 seconds on you and what you do in your role.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Amit Sanyal. I am responsible for a business practice within Comviva, which is a software products company focused on telecoms. And the business practice is related to analytics-driven customer value management. Effectively, how do you drive the best out of the existing subscriber base that you have? Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. And so in terms of what we'll be doing over the next hour, so I have about 10 or 15 minutes giving you a broad intro of where we see telecoms operators today in their use of AI. I'll then be handing over to Amit, who'll be talking through some of the solutions and capabilities that Comviva can offer the CSP sector. We will take some questions and answers after we've both spoken. So if you do have any questions while I'm speaking, while Amit's speaking, then please use the Q&A button on your console and type in the question. We'll address it at the end of the slides. Just one other point to be made: you will be receiving a link to these slides, so don't worry about scribbling notes down or taking screenshots. You will get a link to them within the next 24 hours. Okay, so on that note, I will start introducing you to the overall theme. So I think, as most of you know, we do a lot of survey work with operators, ask them about where they are in different aspects of transformation and the perception of how fast they're moving. And I think it's interesting to start looking at where CSPs are today in their use of analytics and AI versus other technologies and capabilities. So when we compare them, for example, with cloud more broadly, with the use of DevOps and Agile, for example. So I think what we're looking at in this slide, and this was a survey actually done of, and this was actually quite a niche survey. This was about 25 to 30 CIOs globally, and this was conducted in the period May-June 2019. So when it comes to the use of analytics, as you can see, more than half operators have implemented and getting the benefits from analytics, as we might expect, because I think the use of analytics predates AI, or predates the application of analytics in AI. In telcos. When we look more specifically at AI and machine learning, I think as you can see on this, the top left donut shape, we have 1 in 4 CSPs telling us that they're in the process of rolling out but have yet to achieve any results. 1 in 5 say they're achieving results, which is interesting because I find that quite a high figure because it's still early days. I'll be asking Amit about that later on. But a large chunk of you, so I'd say more than half, so this is 50% plus is something that you're looking at but haven't really got around to doing anything yet, and I guess you're in the experimentation phase. So when we then compare analytics and AI with areas such as cloud, I think the cloud usage is a little bit more deployed than AI. But actually, the research that we've done suggests that even in cloud and IT, we still have quite a long way to go with the start of that journey. So this is a different sort of lens, I guess, looking at operators and how they're using AI. This actually is from a survey of about 150 CSPs done in December, January. So this actually is, it's come up to a year old, so hopefully things will have moved on since then. So we asked both CSPs and their suppliers whether CSPs were deploying AI interesting actually to see the comparisons, I think, between suppliers and how they view CSPs deploying AI and how CSPs themselves see their usage of AI. But as you can see by this, that 1 in 3 are starting with proofs of concept. 1 in 5 working with suppliers to building products and capabilities, and I'm sure that would include the types of people that Comviva is working with. And then say 38% saying they've built some internal expertise and incorporating into product and service roadmaps. But I think that process of putting into product roadmaps is actually taking longer than people may have thought. And often that's to do with, I think, issues around leveraging the data that you have in the organization. So if we start thinking about some of the main drivers for deploying AI, clearly the number one driver is delivering a better customer experience. I would go so far as to say that when people at CXO level think about AI, that customer experience is the main driver. And I think the drivers here are similar to the drivers that operators would give around digital transformation more broadly. So customer experience, reducing OpEx across the organization, across operations, and then I think we start looking into areas such as network usage of AI, and then we go down and there's a number of different niche and then broader applications around AI, but very much customer centricity, reducing OpEx, and looking at network performance issues as being the main drivers. So if we're looking more short term and where operators expect to use AI in the short term, again, customer care number 1, clearly number 2 is around predictive maintenance. And I think there's something that I think interesting actually to compare operators' usage of AI for networks and customer care. I think maybe some of the use cases that have already been deployed. We're seeing a number of operators looking and using it in predictive maintenance, and it's interesting to compare the usage of AI across networks versus customer experience. And actually, in a separate piece of research that we did, suggested that there's actually a little more maturity around usage of AI in network than customer care, which was interesting. Then we have areas such as cybersecurity, which has been a massive use of AI, certainly in the financial services sector, maybe less so in telco. So within TM Forum itself, those of you who are active in TM Forum will appreciate that AI and analytics has become a major focus for us. Indeed, we have a dedicated work stream on AI and analytics, big focus around AI operations, around trying to get consistency in data models. And I think when you look at the Catalyst projects that we run, those of you who aren't familiar with Catalyst projects, these are proof of concept projects that involve a number of operators and vendors collaborating to show how they can solve specific problems, how they can address specific opportunities. And I think when you look through those use cases, and building these use cases is central to the work that TM Forum is doing in AI analytics, there's a lot of that focus is around the customer experience, marketing, digital channels. So it's something that it's an area where we're collaborating with industry. Our catalysts are driven by industry, not by us, and so this shows the interest today, as I say, in leveraging analytics to drive AI, particularly in the area of customer care and CRM. So we have a poll question for you. So this is where we like to ask you about how you're using different products and capabilities. So the question we have for you, our audience, is how much use are you making today of AI in your customer experience and marketing functions, so specifically in those functions? And so we've given you 3 choices. We've made little or no use of AI today. Secondly, we're carrying out some trials and proof of concepts. And thirdly, we're already using AI for some use cases. So the more mature you are, the more we'd expect you to choose the third of those options. The less mature, we'd expect you to choose the first of those options. So we'll give you just another 20 seconds to make your choice. Then Amit and I will take a look at the answers and see whether you'll give us what we expect. So Amit, do you have any expectations here where you think most people will fall?
I think I have, but let's wait for the responses.
Let's wait for the responses, yes. So we'll give you another.
In the market generally, these questions are a reflection of that, but let's see what the audience is, and then let's have a quick conversation around it.
So there we go. So let me just refresh this just to make sure that we have the most up-to-date answers. So there we go. So 44% made little or no use of AI. 31% trials and POCs, 25% already using. So any surprises there, Amit?
Not at all, Mark. And this is precisely what we have seen all along. If you ask the general audience on what is their most likely investment for next year or next 3 years, AI would come on top. But if you ask the same audience, what has been your investment in the current year, then you would get some kind of a spread like this, where people who say that we are already using AI for some use cases is hardly a fourth. But for the next year, it would be a high majority. It doesn't come as a surprise, and that's something that I intend to cover in the remaining part of my presentation. What's your view, Mark?
So my view is, I guess it's pretty consistent with you. I don't think this is particularly surprising. I think we may well have some issues around definitions and whether AI is really AI or whether it's use of advanced analytics. So I think one of the challenges we have today is understanding precisely what is meant by the use of AI. And I think there's another issue, which is that I think in many cases, when we see the use of AI within telecoms, AI is going to be embedded in the solutions and software that the traditional partners and vendors will be supplying. So even if you as an operator are not necessarily developing that competence, it may well be that your suppliers are. So that I think is an interesting discussion too.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mentioned before that when it comes to analytics, the key two sets of analytics that are generated within telco are network and consumer and customer. And we saw from the previous slide that when operators think about where AI can be leveraged most effectively, number one was customer experience. However, when you ask how successful those CSPs feel they are today, and this was from a survey conducted in October, November this year. So this survey was specifically aimed at data science teams and people who work in the IT function who are large consumers of internal data. And we wanted to understand, how successful do you think you've been today in leveraging data to improve customer experience? And I think the key one to look at here is the first block of black and red. So just under 50% saying that operators saying that they are using analytics effectively to deliver more personalized services. I think the key there is the personalized services. Because I think people are using it, but not necessarily to create stronger personalized services. So certainly more agree than disagree, but I'd like to see that number pushing above 50% to 60, 70%, but clearly we're not there yet. When we look specifically at digital touch points, and I think as we think about AI in the customer value management function, a lot of it has to be around digital touch points. And I think we haven't made the progress in industry we would like in terms of getting people to interact with operators via those digital touch points. Clearly we have some way to go. The third block there, which is a block that I actually find quite concerning, which is only, if I think the figure is that black figure, only 13% of our respondents consider that they were using social media data effectively to improve customer experience. So clearly, we have an awful long way to go. People see the potential, but we're clearly not there yet. So if we start looking at what some of the barriers are, and I think the barriers can be put into two categories. I think there's barriers which are barriers around culture, organization, prioritization, and then there's broader technology barriers. So I think when it comes to those cultural issues, so this lack of urgency is something which I think is that we should be standing up and taking note of. That's traditionally been the case, I think, with use of analytics. I think the fact that AI is now such high profile means that there's a much stronger agenda coming from the top of the organization to leverage AI. So I think this broad interest in this conviction that AI is going to be useful for the telecoms business is actually something which is needed to actually drive genuine investment in it. I think there are issues which we'll talk about in a minute in terms of the consistency of the data that's being generated across the organization. And there's also issues, I think, around the fact that that data isn't always compatible. There's dirty data, there's issues around formatting. And one point I would like to pick up on here actually is around data governance. And we certainly believe that operators need to put in place some stricter rules that enable the flow of data across their organizations. So if we just look at specifically at data lakes, so this is some research that we did looking at some of the barriers and challenges. So we see operators starting to embrace data lakes, which is something that we would absolutely encourage. However, a number of the operators who have used data lakes are not always satisfied with the results. I think that's probably because they're using data lakes more like a data swamp. So data is being thrown into the data lake without necessarily taking enough time, paying enough attention to how consistent that data is. And so when it comes to using that data, it can be quite challenging for someone going to the data lake, trying to regularize that data, trying to put it in a data warehouse. That slows the process down. It makes it more expensive to extract the value from the data. So I do think operators are pausing and thinking about how best to leverage data lakes. When it comes to data models, I mentioned to you before that we've started to look at this at TM Forum because we have our operators come to us saying we really think we need to move towards a single or a common data model. The most progress I've seen is from one global CSP, which says that 70% of the data it now uses it sits within a common data model. So that's very encouraging, but there are a lot of operators out there who feel that they simply are unable to move towards this data model because I think of the fragmentation of the supply side and the fact they have different companies presenting data to them in different sorts of ways and making that regular and consistent is challenging. So on that note, I hope that gives you some context to what Amit's going to talk to you about. So Amit, over to you.
Thank you, Mark, and hello again, everyone. My name is Amit Sanyal. Over the next about 25-30 minutes, I would like to briefly touch upon not really about what can you do with AI, little bit of use case here and there, but how do you really scale up? And while everybody says machine learning and AI, how do you really scale up? And I'm going to focus on a very narrowed down definition of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is on marketing and marketing automation. And so we will keep it a very strict definition so that we are focused. And let's see if my views sound interesting. Second thing, so a brief introduction about Comviva. We are a part of the larger Mahindra Group, a large conglomerate in India. It's almost a $20 billion enterprise. We cover almost 100-odd countries. And we are one of the leading global digital solutions provider across multiple domains, one of them being customer value management and advanced analytics. brief list of our customers. Comviva works with almost all top global operators, and we have been in business for almost now 20 years, and across both telecoms and banking and financial services segment. I would like to start with a poll question, and this is the second poll. This is just to get an opinion from you that when you consider AI-driven use cases that are either in the discussion stage or actually deployed in your organization, would you say that the main KPI used to assess their value is what? How do you measure an outcome of whatever you have deployed? Do you measure it basis cost savings? Do you measure it basis improvement in customer experience? Do you measure it basis the revenue that it generates? How do you measure effectiveness of AI that you have either considered or you are considering to implement? So Mark, let's give it like 15, 20 seconds and then let's
Indeed. And I think when we put this question together, we had thought about giving you one option, which was a combination. And we put this question. Karen, Amit?
No. Continue, Mark. Sorry.
Okay. So, Amit, so that is very interesting. So, any surprise in that, Amit?
Not surprising at all. And this again, if you see the slides that Mark presented, and when we really hear about AI today, more or less everything talks about improvement in customer experience. And that's what comes here, say about more or less 2/3 of it. However, when you actually see the KPI, if I were to ask the audience improvement in customer experience, what is the KPI that you measure? It moved from point A to point B. What do you measure? And most traditionally, what we have seen is cost, OPEX saving is taken as a measurement of improvement. That yes, we deployed for efficiency and the idea was to improve customer experience, but when I really measure the KPI, it is about OPEX. That really has a dichotomy, and it's visible here. So why are you investing? What is the net outcome in tangible terms that you are doing? The second thing that I want to cover in my presentation is typically all teams around AI and machine learning today are focused on OPEX only. What about the revenue side of the business? So what are those use cases from a revenue angle in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning that organizations deploy? And what are the baby steps that you can take towards such a journey in terms of marketing automation? So that's the second. The third one that I would focus on in the conversation is some very basic startup questions. Do I need all the data? I don't have all the data in a single place. My data is siloed. The organization is fragmented in terms of how data is stored. So is AI useful at all? Second, how much data for how much history do I need to keep to make any sense of any machine learning model? Third is, I don't think my data is really clean, and I don't have a process to clean. So is AI for me is the question that I am trying to answer in my presentation. So going forward, when we say AI is deployed, what does that really mean? And that goes to the first poll question that we had, is when organizations really say that we have deployed AI, what they actually mean is we have done a small proof of concept to try out a use case, or most generically, and this is the highest thing that we see across telecoms globally, is a technical capability has been deployed. Means I have set up a data lake. I have set up a few Hadoop clusters. I am big data enabled. But that does not mean you have applications running on top. So there is a big gap between I have implemented AI versus I am using AI. And most organizations today struggle on how do you cross that bridge from implementing a technical capability to really making use of it in terms of either revenue generation or OPEX savings. Our view is AI is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And I say this a lot of times, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating, but that's what it is. When we come across organizations, typically vendors, giving out packaged models, that's like a big myth. There is nothing called as a packaged machine learning model. Every model may have the same principles, but the construct of the model changes basis the implementation or the use case. Second, so it's not one size fits all. Second, a lot depends on the maturity of the organization and appetite for investment. Goes back to my previous example where I mentioned that most people have run a few proof of concepts on AI or machine learning just to experiment with a few use cases, but the real appetite to invest and go full hog is not there. And the key reason that we see that it's not there currently, but if you ask in the future, going forward, will you invest? Absolutely. Because today, a absolutely critical, discrete measurement of the return of investment is not clear. How do I measure that when I have implemented AI, it has given me X dollars of revenue or Y dollars of OPEX saving? That measurement is fuzzy. Since the measurement is fuzzy, the investment appetite is low, and it's all in the proof of concept and experimentation phase. Second part on AI not being a one-size-fits-all solution is AI requires solutions that can evolve with your AI journey. There cannot be a model. It has to be a journey with a set of models. And today, we find that we are in a rush to implement AI to just being AI enabled. But if I were to say that I have a customer lifecycle management journey, and here are the parts of it where AI or machine learning can supplement and not replace. Instead of saying, how can I do one predictive model and predict one thing? That's not really going to serve the purpose. Third thing, and that's a big item here, that getting the right people is a big challenge. Implementing machine learning requires a pool of data scientists. It requires skill sets and maybe upskilling. It may not be possible at all times for organizations to either upskill or recruit fresh talent. We see increasingly organizations working with a partner network or a vendor network to supplement what they have, rather than try to recreate a full data science skill set in-house. That will always be limited by size, capability, and competence, whereas leveraging a partner network across competencies and domain expertise, so whether it is network or customer experience, sales and distribution, marketing, finance, HR, requires a different data science capability which may not always be available within the organization or may not be available in a way which can scale up. Having said that, assume that AI is deployed, it has larger implications. The first and foremost being technology, people, and processes. Most of the time, the gating factor for AI to scale up within an organization is not the technology capability at all. It is about the processes which are bottlenecks. So, and again comes back to my previous point that if you deploy AI with one use case in mind, that's not really the suggestive way or the best way to do it. But if you identify a journey where some of those steps can be remodeled using a machine learning framework, that's a better way. And it's not just about data scientists, it's also about marketeers too. The way Comviva approaches AI in customer value management is it's a complement to the marketing or IT skills. It's not a replacement. When you say it is a complement, that means the human element of non-data scientists in the team must also scale up to understand machine learning modeling in some way. If it is a black box, then the outcomes or the model variables will always be taken as the truth and the only truth. The problem in machine learning modeling is there are very few ways to measure whether the data or the insights which the model delivers, is it right? Are they relevant? And finally, are they useful? And that cannot be done with the data science skill set alone. It requires the marketing organization and the IT organization also to understand some bit of it. So it's not a data science play alone while implementing AI in marketing automation. Third, it needs a scaling strategy that allows growth with confidence. Now, the operating point here is growth with confidence, which means a very finite and unequivocal measure of return of investment. If I cannot measure directly that my investment in a machine learning model has delivered X, Y, or Z, which is not competing with any other thing that I am anyway doing, then growth with confidence will not happen, and it's not going to scale up. There would always be question about the relevancy of an AI application versus any other competing legacy system that you may have. Robust performance measurement is essential. AI and machine learning is a novel application. Once you implement a model, and if implemented accurately with a confidence of return of investment, it gives an immediate scale up. However, that scale up is like a step. It steps up and plateaus. When it steps up and plateaus, a robust performance measurement is essential to continue that plateau to the next step up. Lot of times, it's not a 45-degree curve that keeps on growing and growing and growing. The machine learning models are steps. You implement a model, it steps up whatever variable you are trying to influence. It can be revenue, it can be customer experience, it can be lifetime value, it can be age on network, whatever that is. It just steps up. After it steps up, it continues at that level till you step up again. That means it requires a model recalibration. And that's a very, very important part in scaling up AI that you cannot just let a model run on its own. It can run on its own, but for some time. After that, it requires recalibration in line with many things. It can be seasonality, it can be change in consumer behavior, a lot of things. Finally, data governance and practices need focus. AI, machine learning can scale up only when there are adequate data governance. GDPR is a prime and good example on the issues around privacy and governance need to be adequately taken care of. Lastly, machine learning is a software. A machine learning model is a software, but this is unlike other softwares. So if organizations work with a typical software engineering mindset of DevOps, this is not going to work in machine learning. Just because it's also another piece of software, the way to implement it, the way to manage it, and the way to operate it is very, very different. TM Forum has a statement, and I have used it liberally here, that AI Ops is the new DevOps. And it's very critical for IT organizations to understand that DevOps, as done in software engineering, cannot be shifted and lifted here to machine learning. So AI Ops is the DevOps equivalent for machine learning. Having said that, every solution, every case that's been built so far can only be improved. But not replicated. You cannot have a packaged model, like I said. What are the key things here? And I have marked some of the items with a tick, and I'm going to focus on it a little more going forward. Flexible capability, flexibility to adapt to seasonality. Basically, AI model's ability to be reinvented frequently. That frequently is not a weekly frequency. It can be a month, a quarter, but it's not a packaged system with finite fixed variables. Second one, as far as customer value management in marketing operations, marketing automation is concerned, AI is predominantly about machine learning. We have seen numerous times that with and without machine learning capabilities in a marketing automation system, the outcomes or the influence of the variable, whether it is revenue or customer experience or value or cross-sell, upsell, is in the range of 3 to 5 times. So that's the difference between a machine learning enabled or capable system versus something which is not. Lifting and shifting does not work. One more important part here is when organizations start on customer value management or marketing automation, what should you start with? What's that first use case? And we recommend that it's not a use case at all. The first step to start is every customer has profile information which is present in the data warehouses or BI systems. The step one model is to enrich the profile of the customer. Starting with an use case directly is not the right way. So step one is just start with what you have and just improve the profile of whatever you have. Then build up use cases later. If I were to go a little deep on a few of those things, like I said, AI is predominantly about machine learning, which is to enrich the customer's profile. To give you a simple example, every customer has several attributes, and those attributes are present in BI or data warehouses. Typically, these attributes are 100, 200 KPIs or values, either summarized or raw, and just stored and accumulated every day, every second basis, new transactions that come in. Now, I cannot generate more attributes than what I have, right? For example, if a customer's attributes are how many calls he makes, what's the minutes of usage, data usage, type of handset he has, blah, 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 these are finite. How do I generate more attributes through machine learning is where you use the existing attributes and create new from them. These can be matrices, this can be trends, variances, standard deviation scores, credit scores, and a host of others. So existing attributes can be used as input matrices into machine learning models. No new attribute is required from the network, and these attributes can be used to create far more number of additional attributes for the same customer which did not exist earlier. So step one is to enrich the existing customer profile. Step two in the machine learning or AI journey in customer value management is to create recommendation engines for various sorts of things. Now, when you combine customer profile and recommendation engine together, some of the things that we see and are very common today are churn prediction models, recharge or reload prediction in the prepaid telecom space, or a bill lapse prediction or a bill payment prediction kind of in a post-pay scenario, social influence scoring, social sentiment scoring, multi-sim behavior in highly complex, highly teledense and market. These are like some of the very simple and very starting point use cases to start on the AI journey. Why we fundamentally recommend these, that these sound simple, but these are fundamentally the basis on which the business runs. If I were to use, and these are also done in some shape or form, however crude or it may be today, but it's not that it is absent in the telecoms network. Machine learning only fine-tunes what you have. Second point, implementing a recommendation engine is far more complex. Why it's far more complex is because of the definition of the recommendation itself and how do you measure effectiveness. We suggest to have a random target group, let offers go to a random target group, and then gets added to a recommendation model basis sufficient unbiased training data. That means a recommendation from a machine is not taken, from an AI model, is not taken as the final truth. Still, it is updated and refined with a small random target set. This goes very different to common saying where you have a package recommendation model and it starts recommending from day one. It can. That may not be the most optimal way to offer recommendations to the customer. Lastly, lifting and shifting does not exist. Data sets are never the same. Even the same attributes in two telecoms operators in the same country are never the same. Offer library is always different. The product catalogs that each one of the telecom operators have are vastly different. Model objectives are also different. I will give a simple example of a very basic machine learning model for churn prediction. Now, in the same operator network, I can have a churn prediction model to predict two different things. I can predict churn from the network, means I leave the operator and take a subscription for a different operator, or I can predict churn from a particular service. If I have a value-added service that I have subscribed to, or if the operator is quad play and I have one of the services, what is the likelihood of churn from a service? Now, it's the same operator, two different model objectives. One is to predict churn from the network itself and another is to predict churn from a service. Same model cannot be used. So lifting and shifting really does not work. So there is nothing called as one model. There is nothing really called as even at a very basic level, a churn prediction model. Going forward, if I were to really simplify the whole scope and say, what are those one or two things? And I will limit myself to just two that may turn the tide and give tangible, incremental, measurable, and sufficiently high upsides. And there are only two. First thing is, the offer to make or not to make is the first decision point in a machine learning model. The start point cannot be which offer to make. The start point is whether an offer to be made at all. Most systems that we come across miss the first step. They directly start with an offer. Assume that the customer always wants an offer. That's not really true. I may not want an offer. So the decision is not about what offer to make. That comes later. But the first decision the system should have is whether I should make an offer at all or not first. Having decided that I need to make an offer and here is an offer that more suits the particular customer, the next point is real-time execution. And AI from an offer recommendation engine combined with real-time execution or offer placement or presentation of the offer is an extremely powerful combination. Most of the times, the offer execution engines are real-time, but real-time to what? The idea here from an offer execution perspective is it has to be real-time to the context of a particular user. I may have an offer that I want to recommend. It may be the most suited for a particular user, but at a particular point in time. So understanding the context in a user journey and not just saying that here is a list of 4 recommended offers to the customer and I can recommend it at any time. That does not work. It is real-time execution coupled with execution at the right time, and the right time context also comes from another machine learning algorithm. Having said all of these, what we see globally as some best practices and more importantly some of the red or the don'ts is appetite for investment and infrastructure are really the start point. There is no real case where infrastructure is a gating point. Now comes back to what I started in my initial conversation when customers ask us, how much data do I really need? Or I have all the data, but it's not together in a data lake. It's all siloed. Or I don't have more than 1 month of data. Our recommendation always, or suggestion more appropriately, has always been don't let the infrastructure stop you. every data set, however small it is, whether it is aggregated or not, is still useful for some use cases. So a lot of investment is usually made to aggregate data when it's not really required. And if my use case definitions are sharply focused, I can make do with what I have and not really first put in effort and investment in combining all the data into a single data lake or aggregated format, or even looking for how much in history can I go to gather that data. That's not really required. So that's like a, I would say, a myth that I want to break here. Then, after you have a model and you have deployed the model, and the model also delivers result, what happens next? People who have deployed the model go away. If it is a partner-led ecosystem, that goes away. A real AI scalability happens only when you also deploy a model workbench. A workbench is like a GUI-based studio where you can play with models, you can test models, you can train models, and you don't need to be a data scientist. Real scale-up of AI happens when AI moves beyond the data scientists. And people in IT, in marketing, in network, these streams, without being so-called a data scientist, are also able to use. And that's not possible if they were expected to code. And if they are not expected to code, then the enabling factor for AI scale-up is to provide a graphical user interface-based studio where models are really simplified and not presented in a technical way. So that's the second best practice that we see happening, and which offers a real quick scale-up of the AI applications. The third is, like I mentioned before, use case by use case is the best. I see a lot of organizations trying to implement a library of use cases. May not be the most optimal approach. A use case by use case is the best approach, where you experiment with the use case, see the result, see if you really need that. Just because it's offered doesn't mean it will work in your network, because lifting and shifting does not work. And then go to the other use cases. Not really try to implement all the use cases together. There is nothing called as a library of use cases. Robust performance measurement, unless and this is the most critical for scale up, because when at the end of the day, when the CEO says, what did you achieve? It has to have a clear and non-competing measure of performance. And it has to be either in revenue terms or in cost terms. When I say my goal is to improve customer experience, how do I measure customer experience? It has to be that customers are complaining less and hence I have a saving on OPEX, or customers are happier and staying on the network and hence I have higher lifetime value. The measurement has to be tangible and either in revenue or cost terms. A fuzzy measurement criteria will be sufficient in a short term, but it will never allow the system to scale up, because the organization will not believe that the investment has paid for itself. A capability that supports continuous experimentation. When we talk of modeling studios, we don't talk of models, we talk of experimentation, which means I really don't know which models are useful. System should allow for experimentation and dropping of things if they don't work out. And that's only possible when you are not fixated about a particular use case, but you are fixated about a particular problem statement. That I have a problem A, I may try it with 5 different things. Whatever works, works, and things which don't work, I just drop. Keep an eye on your data. This is very important. Models cannot be running standalone on their own forever. That's not possible. That's why we don't say anything like a packaged model exists. When even some of our customers ask us, how many models do you have? We say we have none. Because that's true. We have models which are not packaged, but these are models in concept, and it has to be really implemented on the network for them to deliver. And also maintained. Maintaining a model means recalibrating models, retraining models at very, very close frequencies. It need not be a day, it can be a month, a quarter, which takes care of change in consumer behavior. So keeping a close tab on the data is another key important thing that we see as a best practice. The last two are relevant from an organizational point of view, and I have spoken about AI ops, that software engineering, the way it is applied to machine learning and AI models, are not the same as DevOps. So while implementing and while maintaining the regular software engineering skill sets on the IT side may not be the most optimal work to work with machine learning algorithms. Lastly, and this is our biggest learning globally, is the data science organization in an operator, whether it's a partner-led ecosystem or it's an in-house team, is always going to be a small team. This small team is culturally different from the rest of the organization. They cannot be bracketed into marketing, finance, HR, IT, network, anything. This is a small team, a new team, a team which did not exist even 1.5 years back and is culturally different. So it's cultural embracement of AI and machine learning as a complement and not as a threat of replacement is the first and the most crucial thing in the organization. When we talk of AI, we never talk of replacement at all, and rather it's always a complement, because truly it is that. A machine can only do so much. Beyond that, it's the human intervention jointly that makes the machine work. Having said all of this, and I am truly on my last slide, is how does Comviva do all of this? So a quick slide on what we call as Mobilytics. Mobilytics is a real-time marketing automation platform where we look at customer attributes. We call it DNA, behavioral DNA. We look at almost about 1,600, 700 attributes like that. It is machine learning driven decisioning and real-time offer execution and fulfillment. Now, if you see the block in between, the top and the bottom are based on something called as a Lambda architecture, which means it has both a real-time layer and a batch-based static layer. You always don't need real-time functionalities. So are the static data that is there in the BI and data warehouse systems, are they irrelevant? Absolutely not. Systems which can use both static data and real-time and a combination of both in an architecture like this are the most useful in our way. That means you are leveraging everything on the network that's available, whether it is in a machine learning form or not, and also complementing that with streams of data which are incoming events. That's all I had, everyone, and we would be happy to take in questions should you have any.
So, Amit, thank you very much. That was great. And what I really liked about your presentation was that it was so practical, and so much of what we see in here around AI is around future potential, but you gave a very practical guide to what operators can be doing now. Now, I see we have a lot of questions have come in. Some of these are quite deep and technical, so I'm actually going to ask Amit to reply to some of these after the webinar, but let's take some of the broader ones of interest to more people in this. So one of the things you talked about a lot, Amit, was, as I say, being practical, doing things now, experimentation. And so, if you are someone on this webinar and you're at the fairly early stages of looking at how you can use AI and CVM, if you wanted to invest now to develop a quick win, just to prove the value of what you're doing, how do you go about choosing what specific use case you would for that quick win?
Thank you. Good question. We hear about two things in the industry a lot, and one is related to marketing and the other is related to RAN, radio access networks. Out of, say, operational efficiency on radio access networks or marketing automation, what we find in reality on the ground, a quick win is related to marketing automation. So a few small use cases related to a cross-sell or upsell using a machine learning algorithm, because that algorithm complements the systems that are already running to the magnitude of 3 to 5x. That's a huge efficiency improvement and can give immediate returns on investment in terms of revenue uplift.
Okay, that's a good tip. So I have another question here, and this touches on some of the issues that I was raising in my introductory slide. So the question is, a typical challenge faced by enterprises is ingestion of data from multiple sources in different formats containing different attributes to create a unique profile of every customer and deduplicating all the other entries. What are some techniques to tackle this?
So one I already mentioned in my conversation, where you don't really need to aggregate all the data. You can still include attributes by looking at data and deriving additional parameters from existing data. That's one. Second one, the big part of aggregating data, even if there is already a journey in the organization to aggregate data which are in parts or siloed, the big part is looking at dirty data. And the way we recommend is just to filter out outliers, and that's step one and the most basic step. If a value does not look similar to others in the same period for a same customer, filter them out and put in any other measure. It can be a mean, median, mode, or whatever. But two basic ones, you don't need to aggregate everything. You can still drive or derive additional attributes and a significant number with the data you already have. However, if you are already in that journey of data aggregation, the first basic rule to apply is to filter out outlier data points. And that's it. These are the most simple ways to get onto the AI journey without significant investment right in the beginning.
So your message is very much be pragmatic and just do it. Seems to be
absolutely
what you're saying.
Keep it simple. And what we see in field realities is simplicity delivers exactly the same value as a highly complex system, or even more.
So actually, I'm just going to ask you just one last question, I think, before we wrap up. So, Comviva, you have customers all over the world, and I'm sure you're talking to most, if not all of those, about the potential of using AI in CVM. Do you see many differences in the level of maturity of the operators that you work with, or are they all moving at the same speed?
We see maturities in terms of existing infrastructure. However, in terms of the operators' appetite for investment or the clear definition of use case for AI or machine learning objectives, absolutely not. And the front runner if I were to take names of continents where we see the highest pace that's happening today are in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, contrary to popular perception of this being in Europe.
And that's very interesting. And so why is that, do you think?
Because if legacy, look, most of the times existing infrastructure is taken as a barrier to implementing AI or machine learning. That the systems are legacy, data is in silos, it cannot be done. If you take out that barrier and say, do with what you have, then you are actually normalizing all sorts of infrastructure. Yes, there are differences in maturity in basis countries, basis operator groups, basis geographies on existing infrastructure. But if you take out that away and say, let's do with whatever you have, then we have seen investment appetite and objectives are absolutely the same. There is absolutely no difference between geographies.
Very interesting. Okay, so I'm aware of the time, and there are a number of outstanding questions, and we will get back to you with answers to those. But I mean, thank you very much for everyone for their attention today. Amit, thank you for a great set of recommendations. As I said before, what I like is that this is something that you can do now, and I think that's a very good message of the industry, which is, do things simply, take small steps, get results, which I think is very, very, very interesting. So Amit, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to the audience, and happy Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.
Happy Christmas. Bye-bye.